Hello and welcome to today's episode of the Work at Home Rockstar podcast. Today's guest is the founder and CEO of BookThinkers. And what he does is he helps authors to promote and market their books. So super excited to be rocking out today with Nick Hutchison. Hey Nick, you ready to rock?
I am ready to rock, Tim. Excited.
Beautiful. We always start off here in a good note. So tell me a story of success in your business that we can be inspired by.
Well, I'll tell you what, my agency hosted its first ever in-person event for authors last year. And to keep things in the music theme here, I want to tell a quick story. When I was in high school, I went to a Maroon 5 concert with my family and a couple of my friends. And Maroon 5 was one of my favorite bands growing up. I really enjoyed their music. The album Songs About Jane, one of my all-time favorite albums. And that was a really fun kind of big moment for me when I was younger. And I always, when I think about that period of my life, that pops up. Well, fast forward a few years, I had Ryan Dusick, the original drummer for Maroon 5, at my event speaking on stage with me because he put out a book called Harder to Breathe. And so just talk about a rock star moment for me. Going from attending a concert and thinking, wow, like what an amazing group of people this is, listening to their music all the time, to spending a lot of time, 3, 4 days hanging out with Ryan and then interviewing him on stage at my own event. Like what a cool success story. And so when I saw the prompt, that was the first thing that came to mind. And just really proud of that moment and kind of how it came full circle.
That's so awesome. Right on. Man, Maroon 5 was your high school, eh? I'm old.
Yeah, you know what? And I guess even before high school too, but yeah, I just turned 30. But what I like to say is if you include all of the books behind me, which condense decades of somebody else's greatest life lessons and experience into days, and I've read hundreds and hundreds of them. If you count that, then I'm thousands of years old. So
Oh
that's the way
yeah.
that I like to look at it.
Well, and it's quite impressive because I've found that I know that even in my generation, very few people read. And I mean you're 15 years younger than I am, so uh kudos for you for still reading all those books because it does make a massive difference, especially reading. I mean, actually, I'll ask you that question. What do you think is the difference between reading a physical book that you got behind you and maybe an audiobook?
Well, 80% of the inputs to our brain, 80% are visual. So by default, if you're only listening to a book on Audible or something like that, I
Mhm.
think you're at a slight disadvantage if your goal is to retain and implement the material to change your behavior. I mean, I kind of live in the world of personal development, nonfiction, business type books. And so if your goal is to use the book to make progress in your life or solve a problem, I think you're better off reading a physical paper book simply because you can develop a relationship to the information more efficiently. You can store it and access it again more efficiently. Plus, reading a physical paper book is an act of monotasking, the opposite of multitasking, right? So focusing on one thing at a time. Whereas most of us, when we listen to audiobooks, we're in the car, so we're multitasking. We're at the gym, we're doing chores, we're doing busy work. So, you know what? I'm a big fan of both modalities. I think
Yeah.
that they offer, different unique benefits. But I think, from an efficiency standpoint, it's better to read a physical paper book. What about you? What are your thoughts?
Oh, I'm in a full agreement with that. I'm definitely supportive of both because being able to multitask is huge. I mean, to be able to go do your walk or do your exercise or go get groceries and whatever you're doing, driving, and you're also listening to something, that's fantastic. But I have noticed that sometimes I'll have to like listen to an audiobook multiple times and you know every time you're catching a whole bunch more stuff that you missed the last time. Right. And that kind of makes sense, right? Because you were doing something else. Maybe your focus was over here. You didn't get all that stuff. But I find that when you're actually reading that physical book, you rarely read books multiple times. You kind of get what you need out of it. And and then the other part of it too is that I found that when I was reading the physical book, I knew when I was missing something. Like I'd get to the end of the page and I'd be like, oh, I wasn't really paying attention. You go back right away. Whereas with the audiobook, I don't find that I notice that as much. It just kind of like rolls and next thing you know, it's done. Like I don't know, do you notice that too?
Yeah, yeah. And you know what? I still listen to a lot of audiobooks, but I choose to listen to biographies,
Mm,
autobiographies, fictional stories, maybe books that satisfy curiosity rather than like teach me a life skill or solve a problem. So I think a little bit of it is just the choice. And also, big books, even working in the industry full time and reading like 50 to 100 books a year, they still intimidate me, books more than like 400 or 500 pages. So I'll choose to listen to those books instead as well.
yeah, yeah, exactly. Yeah, and I like when I'm listening to a book, I find like sometimes it's like more of like a pump up thing. Like I find like I get inspired by listening to an audiobook more than retaining the actual information that's in it, which
Yeah, that happens to me with events as well. So I enjoy attending like personal development or business style events.
mm,
And it's never to learn from the person on stage. It's to be in the headspace to make bigger decisions. Like it
mm,
motivates me to be in the right headspace, to be confident, to be the boldest version of myself. And I think that's a cool byproduct of listening to audiobooks or attending in-person events. It's not the retention piece that changes your life. Most of the time, it's just being around that energy.
right. Okay, well, Nick, I hate to be a downer here, but we got to talk with a bad note too. So, sometimes things don't go as planned. So, can you share with me something that didn't go as planned for you and how we can recover?
Yeah, you know what? When I was first starting my agency, BookThinkers, I had a totally different idea for what the business was going to be. I originally set out to build a mobile application that nonfiction readers could use to retain and implement more from the books they were reading. You could store your favorite takeaways from each book, you could see what your friends were reading. There was some repetition functionality built into it. And I got together with a couple of my friends and we spent tens of thousands of dollars and hundreds of hours of our time building this out and outsourcing the build to a company overseas. And at the end of that journey, years later, we had nothing to show for it. So I learned quite a few lessons as a recent college graduate. One was it always takes longer than you think it's going to. I thought, hey, we'll build this app, it will go seamlessly, we'll make $1 million next year. Not the case. It always takes longer than you think it's going to. And the other kind of core underlying lesson that relates to that is that slow and steady wins the race. Here I am a number of years later. I've built a successful agency. It's a healthy business. I've got 10 people on my team. I serve people in an amazing way, constantly trying to over deliver, but it was a very different direction. I think the other lesson that I learned is that failure is part of business. You're taught down here in the US in the traditional education system, and I'm sure north of the border up in
Oh
Canada
yeah.
as well, that as a student, failure is a bad thing. You're taught to avoid failure, fall in line, think the same way that your teachers think. You'll get penalized if you answer things incorrectly or maybe have a different opinion. And sometimes you're held back as a result of those things. But in the world of business, the opposite is true. Failure is the best teacher. Failure gives you data and you use that data, you reflect on it, you iterate and you change. And that's what leads to success. And so now I've come to expect failure as part of operating a business. And when you expect something to happen, it doesn't surprise you, it doesn't shift you into a negative spiral. And man, I welcome failure. I know it's around every corner, and that's okay. That's what I like about being a business owner.
Love it. I love it. Yeah, I remember when I was doing I used to work in like straight up sales and we used to have these no goals, how many no's are you going to get today rather than how many yeses. And it's just such a thing that throws you upside down because I mean, like you say, I mean, we're sort of like brainwashed into thinking that failure is a bad thing, and no's are supposed to depress you and stuff like that. But if you create a goal to get so many no's, then it's like, yay, I got no's today. I think it kind of like changes the way you think a little bit, right? It makes it a good thing that you've got that many no's, right?
Yeah, I had a door-to-door sales job when I was in college and we were counting no's.
Mhm.
If it took 200 doors, or I don't remember what the actual numbers were, but let's say it takes 100 doors to set up an estimate. Well, every single no is getting you closer to a yes. Like the goal is 300 doors, not three yeses. And
Yeah.
that's a lead measure. You have control over it, not a lag measure, which is an outcome. So yeah, I agree. Yeah, you look at the nose as just part of the process.
Love it. So now you've actually been working from home for quite a while now. So I'm sure that you've figured out some, some stuff around your jam room and around your home office. So tell me some things that we can implement into ours.
Well, I'd like to tell everybody a little bit about a concept that I wrote about in my book, Rise of the Reader. The concept is titled Play Bigger Triggers, PBT for short. And play bigger triggers are environmental cues that you insert into your environment that reinforce positive frames of thinking. And so, for example, I have a bunch of motivational wall art that sits behind my desk, things that when I look at them, I feel inspired, positive messages that again reinforce the person I'm becoming. And my office space is filled with them. I mean, you can't help but walk up into my office space and feel like, holy smokes, this is a pretty cool vibe. I've got the motivational office art. I've got the bookshelves with like a
Mm,
thousand books behind me, and this is only a fraction of what you can see. I've got souvenirs all over the shelves from the places that I've traveled and the experiences that I've had. I've got bright colors. I have a meditation chair over in the corner with my red light. I've got my PEMF mat and my infrared mat over there in my reading corner. And, a couple of couches. I actually have some home gym equipment to get the blood flowing if I ever feel like I need to wake up during the workday. I've got a cooler full of my favorite drinks. I've got all my snacks. So it's like, this is my spot. And I'm the most productive and the most energetic in my spot. And I'm so happy to call it my jam room. I really am.
it's awesome. That's awesome. And I mean, I think that when we talk about motivation and even like willpower, right? I've noticed that people that have the most willpower are the people that just set their lives up way rather than like it's not like they've got, a bunch of junk food when they're on a diet all around and they just like sit it on their desk and go, I'm not going to eat it. It's the exact opposite. They don't have it anywhere near them, right? And it sounds like you've got something like that set up too, right?
Yeah, one of my coaches, he says he sort of looks at strategy and willpower as the two factors that make up, let's say, 100% scale. And
Mm,
so the more strategy you have, the less willpower you need,
yeah.
right? The less strategy you have, the more willpower you need. And so for me, yeah, I love setting up an environment that is productive and energizing and positive and uplifting. My wife and I were looking for a new home a couple of years ago, and we looked at a bunch of new builds in the area. And a lot of them had office space, but it was in the basement. And I just, sometimes we invite authors to come over here and film in my office space, my studio. And there was just this idea of like walking down into a basement with no windows that I didn't love. And then we found this space where you walked up onto the third floor and it was this big open space with a bunch of windows. And I was like, that's the vibe that I want to go after. When people walk up into this space, they feel uplifted, getting a little woo woo, but that's how I feel about it. And so, yeah, like people ask me all the time, I'll be on a call at like 6 p.m. or something, and they'll be like, how do you still have so much energy? And I'm like, my environment is infectious, it's contagious, it's full of energy, it feels really good. And so I think that more people should pay attention to the environment that they have at home when working from home and really try to install play bigger triggers, artwork, souvenirs, things like that that reinforce the way you want to feel.
Love it. So I mean, you mentioned one band member already, your wife, but now tell me, how do you surround yourself with the right people and, how important is that?
I think it's incredibly important. Jim Rohn is famous for saying you are the average of the five people that you spend the most time with.
Mhm.
And to take that a step further, I've heard it said if you're around five millionaires, you'll be the sixth millionaire. If you're around five bums, well, you'll be the sixth bum, right? Or
Yeah,
burnout
yeah.
or whatever you want to say. So I think it's incredibly important to be conscious of those five people that you spend the most time with. So yeah, I have my wife and my dog. We just got married last year, so we haven't started a family just yet, but we plan on doing that in the next couple of
Congratulations.
years. Thank you so much. Yeah. And then I have 10 people on my team at BookThinkers. So everybody has come from my community. We've worked with them in some capacity and then eventually ended up hiring them and bringing them onto the team. Everybody believes our core values. Everybody believes that the right book at the right time can change somebody's life. Everybody's already a reader. And these are high achievers, but they're also people that value a holistic sense of success. And what I mean by that is in this industry of entrepreneurship and business, I've met and unfortunately interviewed a lot of people that are very, very financially successful, but they have terrible relationships and they're not healthy. And I
Mm.
do not think that that is success. So all the people on my team, they understand this balance of freedom and the importance of health and energy and having great relationships with the people around them and then the money. So I those are some of the important things about my team, my band.
Hey, Rockstar. I hope you're enjoying this episode of the Work at Home Rockstar podcast. If you didn't know already, my business is Creative Crew Agency. We build websites. Now, let's talk about your website for a minute. Most people realize that at this day and age, we need a website, but we don't really know what the website is supposed to do. And sometimes you'll just go and build a website for the sake of building a website. What I do is I make sure that your website actually accomplishes a goal. Now, there are three main goals to most websites. Number one is to provide information and build credibility. Number two is to schedule some sort of appointment and get them onto a sales call. Number three is to sell something like an e-commerce site. Now, when you're setting your website, you have to be very mindful that the visitor doesn't know what to do. And so you have to provide them with a roadmap that leads them down a path to wherever you want them to go. On my website, I want them to be on a free consultation. So that's why when you go to creativecrewagency.com, you'll see information about scheduling a free consultation. Now, for you though, I'm going to provide you with an extra link so that you can get your free website audit. Go to creativecrewagency.com/free website audit and schedule an audit with me. And I'll go through your website live and determine what we can do to improve your conversions and make sure that you're getting the business from your website. Go to creativecrewagency.com and we'll see you there.
Right on. And that's super. It's something that I think that more people should be conscious of when they're putting people around them is like just this overall like holistic view of the people that they're putting around them rather than just looking for a specific skill, right?
Yeah, I think so. I Another fun way to think about this is like if your friend circle doesn't inspire you, then it's actually a cage, right? And they're
Uh,
holding you down. And
yeah.
I think that when I first got into this world of personal development and positive thinking, I was a little bit too quick to burn some bridges, right? I felt like here's a good metaphor for it. There's a metaphor in the beginning of a book called The Mastery of Self by Don Miguel Ruiz Jr. His dad wrote a book called The Four Agreements, which is amazing. And he says, imagine you wake up and you're at a party and you're sober, but everybody else around you is drunk, swinging from one end of the emotional spectrum to the other. And every time you try to speak to these people, they just violently, like lash out at you. That's how I kind of felt when I first got into this world of personal development. I'm like, there's so much opportunity to learn and grow and be positive. And a lot of the people that were around me at the time just wanted to like drink until the sun came up, like just wanted to eat terrible food, like could care less about what job they had once we graduated. And I wanted something different. And so I did kind of aggressively burn a few bridges at the time
Yeah.
that I regret. It was a little bit too much too fast. So I think that, what I've learned is not everybody in your life is meant to serve as motivation or a business partner or an accountability partner or a disciplinarian. Like some people are just meant to be friends for the sake of being friends. But in the context of entrepreneurship or having a band, you want people around you that are serious and are fighting for the same thing you're fighting for. And I think it's important to be aligned on core values.
Yeah. Wow, it's really deep, and I experienced a very similar thing. Right? When you start to get into a personal development world, and I mean, Jim Rohn's a good example. Like, there's a lot of speakers and you know people that we follow, I guess. And once you start to get into that, and you start to think about, oh wow, there's so much more to life. All of a sudden, you start talking about that to your friends and to your family, and a lot of like, I mean, we really are indoctrinated into something that's totally the opposite. I mean, someone who
Yeah.
goes out and parties all the time is looked as look at even high school, the people that are out there really not doing a whole lot of good, positive behaviors are the popular kids. And you're like, wow, that's kind of weird. And then the people that are like studious, are the nerds. And you're like, oh, okay. So the people that want to actually excel at, hey, and I'm not necessarily saying that school is the best thing that you should be excelling at. I mean, I think that there are soft skills involved, and it turns out that a lot of times the uh, people who don't necessarily fit into the school system end up being the bosses of the studious kids that excelled in the school. So I'm not saying that that's the best thing to do, but bottom line is that there is a goal. School and marks is the goal, and they excel at it, but they're being put down for it, right? Anyway, I mean that all that to say is that you find that you start talking to them about excelling in life and getting better and bettering yourself, and I'm not going to eat this type of food, and I'm not going to drink all the time. Maybe I might drink socially, but not right to the extent that they are, and they're all putting you down for it, and you might actually have a reaction that's not necessarily good and burn out those bridges. Hey, I get it. I get it too. And I've recognized, and I'm sure you have too, that it's not necessarily that they're not going to come around, because I have found that some of those people that were, having the kind of lifestyle have, they hit some sort of road, they hit some sort of situation, maybe they hit a health crisis, and all of a sudden now they might end up coming back into your life as someone that is looking at you and going like, hey, I remember we had this conversation a long time ago. Um, what did you do? Right? And next thing you know, they're back at you, right?
Yeah, I think we all have the same potential. Like that's one way to think about it. Like everybody on the planet has the same potential for good and positive behavior and health and wealth and happiness,
Mhm.
but you're right, like not everybody is at the same starting line right now. And so yeah, it is funny how that works as far as school and what's considered popular. Like for me, I didn't fit in either one of those buckets. Like I was an athlete, but but not like the popular sort of jock drinking all the time type athlete.
Mhm.
And I was okay as an academic. Like here in the US, you could take AP advanced placement classes. Like I took some advanced placement classes, but I'd have like a 0% homework average in them. So I was like, I just like fought the system from both ends of the spectrum. I was like, this just doesn't work for me.
Yeah. Yeah. Cool. Well, I mean, it is interesting when you look back at the students, and you know what? I think one thing though uh, that I do take seriously is that I've read more now than I ever did in school, right?
Me too.
And
Yeah.
and that's kind of interesting when you think about it, right? I mean, in school, you're like trying to, go against this. I'm not going to read that. But then you end up getting out. If you meet the right people, like you have, and get into the right circles, next thing you know, you're reading more than you ever did. So,
Yeah, that's one thing. I mean, I would never trade places with where I'm at today because I'm super happy about it. But
mhm,
like if I had a regret, it was not it was starting later. Like I didn't start reading this type of material until I was 20. And
mhm,
you can only like those what ifs are sometimes fun. I mean, they're not practical really to think about, but like the what ifs are fun to go back and think about sometimes. And it's like,
yeah.
what if I really started reading and applying myself when I was 12 instead of 20? I'd have 8 years of additional perspective in language and a little bit more of a runway, I would imagine.
Yeah, I hear you. I was in my 20s as well when I started getting into the real personal growth type stuff. And, I think, oh, geez, I wish I'd gotten to that in high school. And now I've got high school kids and I'm trying to push it on them. And I think that in a way they'll be better than I was, because I didn't like my parents were pushing this straight up school route. Like you need to go get a university degree and all that stuff. And I'm trying to go, no, no, no. You need life skills rather than necessarily the university degree. So I hope that my kids are going to like take that a little bit more and go, okay, what do I want to do? Have a goal rather than just the goal be I'm going to get a degree, right?
Right. Yeah. I think that's a great way to do it. And, like I mentioned before, I haven't started my family yet, but I'm excited to, I'm excited to parent and then also see how difficult it is, and the rebellious nature I would
Oh
imagine of
yeah.
kids not wanting to do what their parents recommend, like, but it's all going to be fun. It's all part of the process, right?
Yeah. Well, you got about maybe 10 years, if that, maybe 7 to 10 years of like you can get them to do whatever you want. And then after
Yeah.
that, they get their own mind and, and they'll pretty much will do exactly the opposite of what you want them to do for a little while. So,
Yeah.
you know, it's one of those things, right?
Yeah. Yeah. I'm excited for it.
Oh, it's going to be great. You're going to love it. Especially because I think part of it is that you're a learner. So it'll be one of those things where something will happen. I know I was. Something happens, and rather than just going like, I think I know what I'm doing, I hit the books, I hit the internet. I'm like, okay, I'm gonna go do as much research as I can about the situation I'm dealing with and see if I can figure out there's a solution. And there's lots of people out there that have experienced all the same stuff, right? And so you will get the right answers, or at least the ones that resonate really well with you.
Yeah, I think as humans, we make the mistake of thinking that we are unique and that our problems are unique to us. And that's one thing that I've learned, whether it's in business or my personal life, almost in any domain. Other people have figured it out. Other people have faced the same problems that you have, and then they've documented the solution in the pages of a good book and or online in some capacity. So life doesn't have to be so hard if we're willing to learn from the mistakes of other people.
That. So tell me a little bit about getting fans and putting the word out there, actually converting people that are in your audience to people that are fans.
Yeah, I started posting. So I'll give context here. When I started reading these personal development books all the way back in 2015, and they started to change my life, right? I'm solving problems, I'm building skills, I'm applying them to my role, experiencing financial success, healing relationships, becoming healthier. I was like, there has to be a community where I can share this stuff. And I really didn't have one. Like my friends and family didn't want to hear about it. I didn't have much of a social media presence at the time. So I started a new account, BookThinkers, right? And I started sharing the books that I was reading on social media. And I found my people. And over the years of just consistently providing value, I've been able to build a community now that does over 1 million impressions a month organically. We have hundreds of thousands of followers. And it was just brick by brick, showing up and providing value every single day for years, really trying to be of service to the community, answer questions, ask questions, give free value every single day for years and years and years. And there's a great book called The Compound Effect by Darren Hardy. Have you read it?
I have read it. Yep.
Yeah. It's the idea that small steps in the right direction over a long period of time will lead to exponential progression or disproportionately positive results, right? So the same behavior of posting and providing value every single day to a small group of people, eventually that same input, that same action has a much larger output, right? So the same like I remember back in the day, I would be like insecure if a post didn't get 2 or 3 likes. I'm like, oh,
Mm,
you know what? My community didn't like this today. And now something flops if it's not seen by 10 or 20,000 people. And it's
wow.
just funny to see how that's changed over time. Like that's so many people. But I think it's, that core message of showing up consistently and then providing value consistently. Those are sort of the ways that I was able to build that community.
Yeah, and to me, this is awesome. I feel like we're in a really amazing time because, if you look back even like 30 years ago or whatever, like couldn't, you just couldn't build a fan base like that. You kind of needed money, really. It was a matter of like, throwing money at a billboard or whatever. Now it's not about money, it's about time. It's about putting yourself out there and trying to help as many people as possible. It doesn't take a whole lot of money, like you said, to set up an account and start, sinking value into it. And then that is what brings the people to you. And I just feel like this is like golden age. This is like, there's not been a time like this where you could actually have no money at all. I mean, enough money, I guess, for a device and an internet connection, and go out there and build an audience, right?
Yeah, I mean, you just hit the nail on the head. Traditional advertising of yesteryear, it was all about spend.
Hmm.
Today, it's about effort. And I think that the tough thing is delaying gratification. I mean, gone are the times when you could just, well, they're not really, but they're rare. I was going to say gone are the times where you start an account and then all of a sudden thousands of people are paying attention to what you're doing. I think
Yeah.
that you have to focus. There's a great book called The Gap and the Gain by Dan Sullivan and Dr. Benjamin Hardy, and it talks about instead of focusing on the gap between where you are and where you want to be, or the gap between where you are and where other accounts are in the space, like your favorite influencers with millions of followers, instead of focusing on that gap, focus on the gain. Focus on the difference between where you are today and where you were a year ago with no account, not providing any value, with only 100 followers and not 120 followers or whatever. And that shift in perspective is hard, right? Not to compare yourself to everybody else around you, but when you compare yourself to the past version of yourself, all of a sudden comparison isn't the thief of joy, it creates joy. And it's hard to do. I get it. But like when I think back to starting my accounts and again being insecure when a post didn't get a couple of likes, I laugh at that. I think it's goofy. I've come so far from there.
Wow, that's awesome. Well, you know what, Nick? It's time for your guest solo. So tell me what's exciting in your business right now.
Well, I'd like to reiterate that I just put out a book, Rise of the Reader, back on November 1st. This book was written for my community of followers. So we've got hundreds of thousands of people, and over the years, I've received very similar questions from thousands of them around their reading process. So, how do you choose the right books? How do you take rock star notes? How do you implement more from what you read and actually use those books to change your behavior? And the secret is, I wish I could have just recommended a book on that subject. Like, I wish I didn't have to write it myself, but I decided to write it myself because there was no other competing resource. There was no other available resource. So, Rise of the Reader will help you get more from the other books that you read and use those books to improve your life. And so, that's my message. If that resonates with you, the book is available in every format. In most online retailers, you can listen to it, you can read it on any device, you can read the physical book, whatever floats your boat. And I've been blown away at the feedback and the reviews and everything so far. So that's what I'm focused on right now is the book.
Right on. So now, what else do? Do you have another business that you can talk about?
Yep. So BookThinkers is my marketing agency, which you highlighted in the introduction. I've got, like I said, 10 bandmates, and we're helping well over 100 authors a year promote and market their books. And so and the services we offer today probably aren't evergreen, but they're definitely hot right now. So we do short form video content production where we help an author turn their physical book into 50 or 100 pieces of social media content, that organic growth,
Wow.
right? That posting value every day. We do podcast booking, so placing authors on shows to talk about their books. And then finally, book reviews, right? We have an audience of hundreds of thousands of people looking for their next read. And so we can distribute that information and kind of amplify an author's voice. And if there's an author out there who's like, hey, I could use some of those services, then feel free to head over to bookthinkers.com. BookThinkers, spelled just like it sounds. And you can set up a discovery call and we could chat about it.
Right on. I love it. This has been a lot of fun, Nick. You're definitely a rock star, especially in the reading area, and this is really cool. I'm actually looking forward to checking out your book too, because seems like a really cool aspect of it. Actually, if you're a reader or you want to be a reader, this is probably the perfect book for you, right? Especially if you want to be a reader.
Yeah, I'd say there's an opportunity cost to reading and not knowing how to implement it, right? Like these
Hmm.
books have the power to change your life, but nobody ever teaches us that failure is a good thing in school. And nobody also teaches us how to implement information. We're just taught how to memorize it for a test and then we forget it the next day. So I think that we need to kind of rewrite how we approach these books. And hopefully, my book, Rise of the Reader, is sort of a step in the right direction for people.
That's a really good point. Yeah, because we do have some conditioning around that too. That you read the book for the test, and then once the test is done, you forget about it, right?
Yeah,
So we might actually
funny.
be programmed to do that, right?
Yeah, it's funny. I think we've got it backwards, so we're changing that narrative though, right? Like I believe in the positive power of these personal development books. And here's a way that I'll get caught saying it from time to time. If you choose to read a great personal development book, but choose not to implement it, right? No new habits, no
Mm,
new perspectives, you're not changing your behavior. I would argue that that book was closer to a form of entertainment than it was education. And that's not the
yeah.
goal of these books, right? The goal is to change our behavior. But if we're not changing our behavior, then there's no difference between that book in Netflix or that book in social media. Like it was just entertainment.
Yep. Not that there's anything wrong with entertainment. However, if you want to get something out of the book, if that's the reason why you're reading it, then yeah, you get something out of your book to learn how to implement that, right?
Exactly. Yep. Exactly.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much for rocking out with me today, Nick. It's been a lot of fun.
Yeah. Thank you, Tim. I appreciate it.
Right on. And to the listeners, make sure you subscribe, rate, and comment, and we'll see you next time on the Work at Home Rockstar podcast.